Hello, printmaking students. I want to talk to you about some of the things to think about before you get started carving, and then hopefully show you a couple of pointers that will be helpful as you carve. The first thing I want to talk about is this thing here. This is called a bench hook, and it is beautifully elegant and a great idea. So as you can see, it's a strip of, in this case, pegboard or masonite with a thing on the bottom and a thing on the top, and that's a cleat. And what it does is it hooks to the edge of the table. And that means that as we are carving, for example, we have something to sort of brace against. And this is really key because one of the main things I want you to think about as you're carving is how to not stab yourself. So yeah, this is good because when we can push against this, it means that we're not tempted to use our non-dominant hands to hold whatever we're carving. And when you use your non-dominant hand to hold whatever you're carving, even if you just put your hand here to brace it, that's when your gouge or your blade will skitter out of the substrate and stab you. Later I'll talk about how to stop the bleeding, but you have to stop the bleeding if that happens. So use a bench hook. And then the second thing I want to talk about is always carving away from yourself. So if I have a big, beautiful triangle that I'm going to carve that I've drawn on here just now, I might carve this part like this. And I'm bracing just the corner here and this. And then when I want to do these other corners, I'm going to turn it rather than turn the blade towards myself. I have yet to have a student stab themselves in the abdomen, and I hope to maintain that record. So please carve away from yourselves. In my experience, no matter how patient I am, I will have a moment where my gouge slips out of the wood or the linoleum. And if that slip happens away from me, I'm much safer than if that slip happens towards me. So use a bench hook, carve away from yourself. We will be using in our class this really neat tool by Speedball. It comes in a box like this, the Speedball #1 lino cutter assortment. I'm also in this demo using these flex cut tools. You can spend as much money as you want on tools, but for getting started, these are really beautiful. Here's what I like about these. If you unscrew the bulbous end of it, there are 5 little blades in there, and you can swap them out. And so you can also store them in here, which is great because you'll be less likely to lose them. So if you have ever dealt with like a drill or something that has a chuck on the end, this is kind of like that. This part is like a little collar that screws down onto a threaded post. And so I'm going to unscrew it slightly, and that loosens up the stuff in here, kind of like a drill bit. And I'm holding the blade to unscrew, and then I can take it out. I don't know that this camera can focus on it, but in here there's a little bulb, and then there's a loose kind of smiling half circle that fits underneath the bulb. And what you want to do is take these blades, which have a curved back end, and you want to slot that curved back end between the bulb and the half circle. When you get that in there, then you're going to tighten it up, and I find it helpful to hold the blade gently. Tighten it up, finger tight is good, you don't need to use a tool, and then you're good to go. Yeah, sometimes they'll become loose as you're working, you can just tighten it up again, and then a couple times I've seen students unscrew this all the way off, and if that happens, the little half circle can fall out, but just fit it back together and reassemble it. It's fairly straightforward, and if you get into trouble, let me know. I'm here to help. So right now I have this edging blade. The 5 blades, there's a big U gouge, a big V, a little U, and a little V, and then this one. This one's kind of like an X-Acto. It's great for edging things. The U and the V are good for small details. The little U and the little V, and then the big U and the big V are great for removing larger areas. Another thing that I want you to think about with this is when you approach the block, and I should use the linoleum like we'll be using, we are using unmounted battleship gray linoleum from Dick Blick. You can also find this mounted, which is just like they've glued it to a wood block like this, but evenly. When it's glued to a wood block, it's nice because it can be type high, which means you can print it on a letterpress press, or you can, I find it's a little sturdier, it's not so fluffy. But if you ever want to save money, you can buy the unmounted linoleum and use wood glue to mount it to a block of wood and then just leave it under pressure to dry. Here we are. But again, we're using the unmounted linoleum. It works great. Right, so we're gonna be carving away from ourselves, bracing on the bench hook. I've got my blades. Oh, I was gonna talk about edging things. So let's say, I need to illustrate. Let's say you are going to carve a dog, right? Yes, okay. You're gonna carve a dog. So let's draw the dog that you are going to carve. Has its mouth open and a wagging tail. There's your dog. So you're gonna carve this dog. And let's say you're gonna carve it just like this. So it's not gonna be filled in, but you're gonna carve up this white space and this white space to leave that thin black line. One of the first things that you might do is come in with this tool and follow along these edges, just creating a thin groove or gouge along there. And what that does is it creates a natural stop, so that when you come in with, say, your small v or your small u or whatever you're using, remember I've carved a little line there. When I carve this way, it sort of naturally stops at that edge, and I'll be less inclined to go and carve right through that line. So you're building in kind of a redundancy or a backup plan there. The other thing I think about with carving is, again, let's say printing something like this dog. So if we wanted to print a dog that was an outline like this, we would carve out this white and this white, maybe that. But we're going to carve out everything that's not going to print. So this is going to be a really fine line. And if you have any fine lines that you're leaving to carve, you want to make sure that they have a wide base. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to draw you a side profile of the carving. So this is the ink, and it's going to sit on top of this little area of linoleum that you left. So here's your board. You're going to come in with your gouge, and you're carving out this business, and you're carving out that, and then the ink is going to sit on here. If you can, you want to think about angling these cuts like this, so that this base up here that's going to be under pressure from the press or from your Baron, your hands, it has a strong foundation. Conversely, if this is the teeny little area that you're going to print, teeny little area, and you carve inward, this is a precarious structure, and it'll be more likely to either be carved out by an errant gouge or just to be crushed by the press. So you're going to spend all this time developing these images. It's great to do what you can to make sure they're going to last a long time and print well for successive passes through the press, or just successive printing. So carve outward. So for my work here for this first layer, that doesn't make a lot of sense, but when I get to some other layers, I'll make sure and kind of angle my cuts away from the thing that I want to print. The last thing that you'll want to get before you get started printing is some sort of color map or reference photo that is in the colors that you hope to print. And if you're a more experienced printer, you may not need this, but for me, it's really helpful to be able to look at the thing and say, okay, my first layer is white, so I'm carving this, just something to refer to. We will work through these in class, but it's important to plan out your color progression ahead of time so that when you come to carve, you're not wondering what to do. You look at your map and then you go. So for example, for this print that I'm doing, my first color is going to be the background color. I'm going to do what's called a gradient or a split fountain or a blended roll that'll fade from blue to white, which means it'll be a little bit of blue up here and the rest of the print will be, the rest of that layer will be white or transparent. Because it'll probably be white, but maybe have a little tint to it, I'm going to carve out some of these white areas in the roots, so it'll be the white brightness of the paper shining through. And then I also decided, I think I'm going to carve in some clouds here, and I went ahead and did that, but some of them. So you can see some clouds. Yeah, so those are some of the basics. Use a bench hook, tighten your blades if you're using the speedball set, carve away from yourself. What else? Have your color map. Don't carve under the influence. Don't carve when you're really tired. That's when you'll stab your hand and it'll hurt. If you don't know where to start, let me help you. It's literally my job and it's totally my pleasure. And I think once you do one of these, a reductive lino cut, it'll make a lot more sense, or any kind of lino cut. But if you're looking at this going, I don't know where to start, please be in touch. Please, please, please. All right, so I'm going to do a little carving on camera and then I'll wrap this up so this video will not be annoyingly long for all of us. Okay. And I'm just going to talk through what I'm doing for the purposes of video. So I'm going to use a little V. Oh, the last thing I almost forgot. I mentioned our tendency to put our non-dominant hands here while we're carving, which sets us up for stabbing, which we want to avoid. One of the ways that I like to avoid that is to use my non-dominant hand as kind of a guide. So I make sure I have both hands on the handle of my tool. And I think also it allows me to have slightly better control and direction. I'm going to carve that, and then I'm going to turn my block rather than turning the blade towards myself. Carve out a little bit here. And so, and with these little bitty clouds, I'm going to do the outlines with this really thin, tiny V gouge, and then I'm going to get a slightly larger one to kind of scoop out the meat of the cloud or the area that I want to remove. Okay. All right, so I'm not totally done, but I'm going to stop the video there. Those are some pointers on getting started carving.